It was my house. I'd vacuumed those carpets, scrubbed those kitchen tiles, paid that mortgage down to the last penny. Every photo on the walls, every scuff on the floor, every squeaky stair. It was all part of my life, my history, me. So why, when I typed in my code that morning, did the door say, "Access denied"? Not just once, 3 times. Access denied. I stood there in my coat, holding 2 bags of groceries, blinking at the sleek little keypad that I had paid for and never asked to be installed. Before we go any further, tell me where you're watching from. City, state, country. I want to know where you're hearing my story. And if you've ever had to remind someone whose name is on the deed, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. You won't believe what they try to do next. That door, it was like a wall, a very expensive Bluetooth-enabled wall. The worst part? My key didn't work either. The old-fashioned backup key I kept in my purse just in case didn't fit. The lock had been changed. I stepped back, set my groceries down on the porch, and rang the doorbell. Nothing. I rang again, holding it a little longer this time. Still nothing. And then, just when I was about to knock like a desperate fool, the camera above the door lit up. That awful little ring of LED lights flashed, and the mechanical voice chirped, "Visitor not recognized." My jaw dropped. I stepped closer, waved, spoke into the tiny black lens. "It's me. It's Mom." Silence. Then, click. The door unlocked. I blinked, but before I could turn the handle, it clicked again and locked. I'm not proud of what I did next. I banged on the door, I kicked it with my heel, I yelled, I shouted my son's name, Daniel, and even his wife's, Amanda. Nothing. I picked up my phone, called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Then I tried Amanda. Her phone rang twice, then went to voicemail too. I left a message, calm, clear, even though my hands were shaking. "Hi, it's me. The keypad says access denied. The key doesn't work. Please let me in. I just went to the store." I sat down on the porch swing, pulled the collar of my coat tighter. It was chilly, late October. The wind cut through my sleeves like spite. I looked at the bags: milk, eggs, bread, paper towels, Amanda's oat milk, Daniel's brand of coffee. The same things I always picked up for them without being asked. Because I lived there. Because I was family. At least, I thought I was. Let me take you back, just a bit. After my husband passed, I sold our house and moved in with Daniel and Amanda. It made sense at the time. They had just had their first baby, my sweet grandson Ethan, and I offered to help. I didn't come in like a bulldozer. I stayed out of their bedroom, I cooked when asked, cleaned when needed, and gave them space. When Daniel suggested putting part of the home in my name for tax purposes, since I was contributing financially, I signed the papers without question. Family trust each other, right? It started small. Amanda forgetting to tell me about changes to the grocery list, Daniel rolling his eyes when I offered to babysit, doors closed more often, conversations cut short. And then the tech started appearing. Smart lights, smart locks, smart cameras. "Just makes things easier," Daniel said. I didn't argue. I didn't want to rock the boat. But now, standing on my own porch like a stranger, I realized the truth. They weren't just making things easier. They were erasing me. Digitally, emotionally, physically. My phone buzzed. A text. From Amanda. We'll be out most of the day. Best to give us space right now. We'll talk later. No greeting, no apology. Just that. I stared at the message. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone in the flower bed I had planted last spring. But I didn't. Instead, I stood up, picked up the groceries, walked to the car, put everything neatly in the trunk, and sat behind the wheel, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I knew what I had to do. I called my lawyer. Not angrily, not out of revenge, but out of pure, grounded reality. Because while the door may have said access denied, the deed said something very different. The lawyer's face when he read the trust documents and the first crack in Amanda's perfect little plan. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of Gerald Simmons' law office, my heartbeat had settled, but my spine was steel. Gerald had handled my husband's estate, helped me with my will, and knew my family better than most. When I walked into his office, wrapped in my wool coat with my grocery bags still in the trunk, he looked up from his computer and raised a single eyebrow. "Well now," he said slowly, "you've got that face." "What face?" "The one you had when Daniel spray painted your fence in '96 and tried to lie about it." I sat down in the leather chair across from him and placed the trust binder on his desk. "I need you to look at this again," I said. "I think they've forgotten something very important." He didn't say a word, just opened the folder and flipped through page after page until he reached the one I had marked with a yellow sticky note 3 years ago. "Right there," I pointed, Clause B, paragraph 2. Gerald adjusted his glasses. After a moment, he let out a slow whistle. "Oh, Marilyn." "What?" He leaned back in his chair. "You're not just on the deed as a trustee. You're listed as primary occupant, with irrevocable right of residence for the duration of your natural life, unless removed by your own written consent." I stared at him. "I knew we had done something like that," I whispered, but I didn't realize it was worded so clearly. Gerald tapped the page with his pen. "This isn't ambiguous. You can't be locked out, and they certainly can't change the locks or deny you entry, unless you give up that right in writing, which I assume you haven't." "Absolutely not." He smiled. "Then we have a problem. For them." I felt the tightness in my chest begin to loosen, but Gerald wasn't done. He kept reading, flipping back through the trust. "Marilyn, you're also listed as partial owner of the land. Amanda and Daniel can't make structural changes to the property without your written approval. That includes changing security systems tied to entry." I blinked. "So they broke the rules just by changing the lock?" "Exactly. And if they recorded that smart lock system over your access without a hearing or consent, well, that's not just unethical. That could legally be considered constructive eviction." Constructive eviction. The words rolled around in my mind like marbles on a wood floor. "I want to send a message," I said. "Not a lawsuit, not yet. Just a wake-up call." Gerald smiled again, more deeply this time. "Oh, I have just the thing." He drafted the letter right in front of me, clear, formal, but with that unmistakable legal gravity that made you sit up straight. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Faulkner, it has come to our attention that Mrs. Marilyn Faulkner, legal co-trustee and recorded occupant of address, has been unlawfully denied access to her primary residence." I read every word. I made no changes. When he asked if I wanted it emailed or hand-delivered, I said both. And then I asked for one more thing. "Gerald, could you make a copy of that clause? Just 1 page. I want to keep it on me." He nodded and handed me a single printed sheet in a plastic sleeve. It felt better than a house key. When I walked out of that office, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I went back to my car, opened the trunk, took the groceries home. not to their home, to a friend's, Debbie, my anchor in every storm. As we unpacked the bags together, I told her everything. And Debbie, God bless her, poured me a cup of tea and said, it's time they remembered who they're dealing with. That night, I didn't cry. I charged my phone, printed a few extra documents, and laid out my clothes for the next day. Because the door had said access denied. But soon, they were going to learn something they never expected. You don't lock out the woman who still holds the title. In New Chapter, the moment Amanda opened the letter and how her perfectly rehearsed tone cracked for the very first time. Amanda opened the door like nothing had happened. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Her face was polite, smiling even, like she hadn't just locked me out of the house I co-owned, hadn't ignored my calls, hadn't sent me a text message colder than a Michigan drive me in January. "Oh, Marilyn," she said, as if surprised to see me. "We were just about to text you." "I'm sure you were," I said, flatly. I stepped inside before she could finish whatever rehearsed line she had waiting. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and cinnamon wax melts, the same scent she always used when she wanted to feel in control. Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs. One look at his face told me he already knew. The envelope had arrived. "You got Gerald's letter?" I asked, setting my purse down on the entry table I bought when Ethan was born. Amanda folded her arms, her smile thinning. "Yes, we received it." She said it like it was a parking ticket, like my lawyer asserting my legal right to enter my own home was an inconvenience, a minor annoyance, not a seismic correction. Daniel walked halfway down the stairs. "Mom," he began, "we just needed a break. Things were getting tense." "You mean I was getting in the way?" I said, turning toward him. "Of what, exactly? The groceries I bought? The laundry I folded? Or the nights I watched Ethan so you two could go out without paying for a sitter?" Amanda cleared her throat. "We just needed space." "Then you should have used your words," I snapped, "not a keypad." There was silence. The good kind, the heavy kind. I walked into the kitchen. The countertops were spotless. My recipe binder was gone. "Where's my stuff?" I asked. Amanda didn't answer. I opened the pantry. Some of my labeled jars were still there, but others had been replaced. With her glass containers, her font labels. It was subtle, intentional. "Marilyn," Daniel said, now behind me, "let's not turn this into something dramatic." I turned slowly. "You changed the locks. You denied me access. You removed my profile from the system and reprogrammed the voice recognition. And now you're telling me not to be dramatic?" He flinched, just barely. "I'm not here to argue," I continued. "I'm here because you received a legal notice. And I want to hear from both of you whether you intend to acknowledge what it said." Amanda crossed her arms again. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We weren't trying to evict you." "You don't get to evict me," I cut in. "Not without a court order, and certainly not without violating the trust agreement you both signed." I pulled the document from my purse. One sheet, neatly protected in a clear plastic sleeve. I slid it across the kitchen island, like a poker player laying down her winning hand. Amanda glanced at it, then looked away. Daniel exhaled. "What do you want, Mom?" he asked. "You want us to apologize? To give you your room back?" I looked at him for a long moment. My son, the boy I once carried on my hip, the man I had supported through 3 failed jobs and a midlife identity crisis. "I want acknowledgement," I said quietly. "I want respect. I want to stop feeling like a guest in a home I helped you build." Silence again. Then Amanda spoke. "Maybe we all need to sit down, revisit the trust, with a mediator. Translation: stall, delay, try to outlast me emotionally." I smiled. "Already scheduled," I said. "Next Thursday. Gerald will be present, and I expect both of you to read the full agreement before then. I picked up the sleeve and tucked it back into my purse. Then I turned to Daniel. By the way, the voice that said access denied, I had that removed. Gerald filed a formal complaint. It'll be stripped from the software before next week. I'll have access again by Monday. He didn't respond. Amanda bit her lip. I didn't need them to say anything, because for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting, I was leading. And they weren't used to that. Not from me. Not anymore. A new chapter. My meeting with Gerald reveals an even deeper betrayal. The secret amendment Daniel and Amanda tried to file without telling me. When I walked into Gerald's office that following Thursday, I expected resistance. I expected deflection, excuses, maybe even another round of Amanda's passive-aggressive diplomacy. What I didn't expect was an amendment. Gerald greeted me with a mug of peppermint tea already waiting on his desk, bless that man, and asked, "Are you ready for a little twist?" I raised an eyebrow. If it involves another security code or a surprise prenup, I'm walking out. He chuckled, then grew serious. Daniel and Amanda tried to file a motion last month, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. They wanted to restructure the family trust, quietly, without your knowledge. My stomach sank. What kind of restructuring? He opened the folder to a notarized document dated just 4 weeks ago. The title read, Addendum Proposal, Removal of Occupancy Rights for Secondary Co-Trustee Marilyn Faulkner, Contingent on Claimed Disruption. I stared at it. They tried to claim you were a non-compliant resident, Gerald explained, that you were interfering with family decisions, finances, and household function, which, even if true, wouldn't meet the legal threshold for eviction. But the real kicker is, they submitted it under the assumption that you'd already agreed to step down. My jaw clenched. I never signed a thing, I whispered. Gerald nodded. Exactly, which makes this both fraudulent and legally null, but it gives us a window into their intentions. I closed the folder slowly, carefully, like it might bite me. I helped them buy that house, I said quietly. I gave them the down payment, paid for the kitchen remodel, stayed home with Ethan for 2 full years so Amanda could finish grad school. And this is what I get? Gerald didn't interrupt. He knew I needed to say it out loud. They wanted me out so badly, I continued, that they were willing to fake my consent. He nodded grimly. You have every legal right to respond, formally. What happens if I don't? Well, technically, nothing. You still hold legal occupancy. But silence implies tolerance. And from where I sit, Marilyn, this is the kind of thing you confront early, because people who try to erase you once usually try again. He handed me a new letter, this one firmer, with consequences. I took it, read it, and signed my name at the bottom. No shaking, no second guessing. I was done playing caretaker while they quietly tried to bury me with kindness and paperwork. Later that day, I returned home. The smart lock beeped, but this time, it welcomed me back. Literally. Welcome, Marilyn, the robotic voice chimed. Amanda must have reprogrammed it after Gerald's notice. I stepped into the hallway. The air smelled like apple pie, manufactured peace. Daniel was in the kitchen, pretending to look busy. He turned when he saw me. I didn't say a word, just held up the envelope. He didn't ask what it was. He already knew. This was never about you, Mom, he said weakly. We were just trying to make things easier. For whom? I asked. You? Amanda? Ethan? He didn't answer. I walked past him, set the envelope gently on the island, and said, You already made things easier, for yourselves, but now I'm making things clear. I returned to my room, shut the door, and for the first time in months, I unpacked fully. Books on the shelf, slippers by the bed, my robe on the back of the door. Let them feel it. Let them feel every bit of presence they tried to erase. In New Chapter, Amanda invites me to a family meeting. What she thought would be a negotiation turned into something she didn't see coming. Amanda's voice was sweet when she knocked on my bedroom door. That alone was suspicious. "Marilyn, we were thinking it might be good to sit down, all three of us, and just talk." I opened the door slowly. She stood there with her perfectly neutral face and that calm, modulated tone I'd grown to recognize over the years, the voice she used when she wanted to look reasonable while pushing her own agenda. "Sure," I said. "When?" "Now, if that's okay. Daniel's in the dining room." I followed her down the hall, my slippers soft against the hardwood floor I helped pay for. The dining room was set like a war table: 3 glasses of water, a notepad, tissues, of course. Daniel nodded when I entered. "Hey, Mom." "Daniel." We sat. Amanda folded her hands and took a long, audible breath. "So, we've been thinking, this living arrangement isn't working the way any of us hoped, and while we absolutely acknowledge that you have legal rights here..." I held up a hand. "Amanda, before you go any further, I'd like to know, are you recording this conversation?" Her mouth fell open. "What? No." "Okay," I said, resting my hands on the table, "because you did try to file a false amendment, and I'm not in the mood for more surprises." She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Daniel cleared his throat. "Look, Mom, we just wanted to talk about how we can all live here peacefully, maybe with some boundaries." I tilted my head. "Boundaries?" Amanda jumped in, always ready to rescue him when he was floundering. "Like, for example, perhaps designating common areas, establishing hours for quiet time. Maybe you could use a different bathroom during the mornings, since we're on a tighter schedule with Ethan." I blinked. "You want to give me bathroom hours in the house I partially own?" Amanda smiled thinly. "It's just to create a more harmonious routine." "And what about you?" I asked. "What are your boundaries?" She paused. "Excuse me? I've heard what you want me to adjust, but what exactly are you offering?" Silence. I leaned forward. "I've bent over backward in this house. I've cleaned, cooked, paid for groceries, picked Ethan up from school, kept quiet when you snubbed me in front of guests, and the thanks I got was a locked door and a voice assistant telling me I was no longer recognized." Daniel looked down. Amanda pressed her lips together. "I'm not here to negotiate my presence," I said. "I'm here because, unfortunately for you both, I'm not going anywhere. You created this situation. You made it ugly. Now you're going to live with it." Amanda tried to rally. "Well, perhaps we should consider hiring a mediator after all." "We already have one," I replied. "His name is Gerald Simmons. He holds the paperwork you tried to rewrite behind my back. He'll be happy to meet again, but next time, he'll bring someone from the county's elder abuse legal team." Amanda blanched. Daniel looked like he might faint. "You wanted to make me small," I said, quietly. "Invisible, replaceable. But I'm none of those things. I'm a woman who's given everything she had, and I'm done apologizing for still standing." I rose from the table. Family meeting over. In New Chapter, a phone call from my grandson Ethan changes everything and reminds me why I stayed in this house to begin with. The house was silent after I walked away. Not a door slammed, not a word shouted. Amanda and Daniel stayed in the dining room, likely whispering and calculating their next move. But I didn't care, not in that moment. I went back to my room, no, my space, and sat down by the window. The afternoon sun stretched across the floor like golden threads. The room was quiet, but my heart wasn't. I should have felt victorious, but instead, I felt hollow. So much effort, so much tension, and for what? Just to reclaim the right to sleep in my own bed without fear of being erased? Then my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. But the caller ID said Ethan, school iPad. I picked it up, surprised. Hello? Hi, Grandma. His little voice burst through the speaker, bright and breathless. My chest warmed instantly. Ethan, sweetheart, what a surprise. I finished my math test early and we get 5 minutes of call time. I told Miss Carter I wanted to call you. I smiled without realizing it. Well, that's the best thing I've heard all day. He paused. Are you mad at Mommy and Daddy? I blinked. He didn't sound nervous, just curious, like someone observing clouds shift in the sky. Why do you ask, honey? Because Mommy was crying in the laundry room and Daddy was super quiet and didn't eat any toast. And I heard the voice thingy say you weren't allowed inside. I thought maybe the house forgot you. I laughed, softly, sadly. No, baby, the house didn't forget me. Good, he said firmly, because you made the banana bread and the Christmas pillow fort, and you always know where my green socks are. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. You're very important to me, I said, and I love you very, very much. I love you too, he said. Are you coming to movie night Friday? I hesitated. That used to be our thing. Ethan and I curled up on the couch with popcorn and cocoa while Amanda O'Daniel went upstairs to do whatever they did when they weren't parenting. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. I'll have to see. He paused. Okay, but if you come, can you bring your soft blanket? The green one. It smells like hugs. Tears welled in my eyes. I'll think about it, I whispered. Okay, bye, Grandma. And just like that, he was gone. I sat there, phone still in hand, heart twisting in my chest. That call, that tiny voice full of love and trust, reminded me why I hadn't walked away. It wasn't about stubbornness. It wasn't about revenge. It was about him. Because if I left, Amanda and Daniel would control every word, every memory, every moment he had of me. They'd rewrite history just like they tried to rewrite the trust. No, I wasn't going anywhere. Not because I needed to win, but because he needed to remember what truth looked like, what love looked like, what a woman who stood her ground looked like. And I would show him. In New Chapter, Amanda finds out Ethan called me, and what she says reveals just how fragile her control really is. It didn't take long. The very next morning, Amanda was at my door again, but this time she didn't knock with her usual fake composure. She barged in. "Did you talk to Ethan yesterday?" she asked, her voice clipped. I looked up from my book, calmly. Yes, he called me. Amanda's eyes narrowed. From school? Yes, he said he finished his test early. She let out a sharp exhale, arms crossed. That's inappropriate. We never approved that. I raised an eyebrow. He used his free time to call his grandmother. That's not inappropriate. That's normal. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You don't understand how hard we're trying to establish stability in this house. Is that what you call locking me out? That was a reset, Marilyn, she snapped. We were trying to start fresh, but you always make it about power. I stood up slowly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even frown. But something in my presence shifted. No, Amanda, you made it about power when you tried to erase my presence with technology, with paperwork, with staged meetings and smiles. I made it about truth. That's the difference. She blinked. I walked past her, picked up my coffee, and took a long sip. You don't like that Ethan called me, not because it broke rules, but because it proved something. What's that? She asked coldly. That even when you try to cut me out, he still reaches for me. He knows who shows up for him. Silence filled the room. She looked smaller somehow, not in stature, in certainty. Amanda, I said gently, you can try to manage everything with lists and boundaries and house codes, but Ethan's heart isn't programmable. He remembers who holds him when he's sick, who listens to his dinosaur facts without checking their phone, who saved every macaroni craft like it was gold. I put my cup down. I don't need your permission to be his grandmother, and I don't need your blessing to be myself. She didn't respond, but her silence told me more than words ever could. She was afraid, not of me, but of losing the version of the family she tried so hard to control. In New Chapter, a surprise visit from Gerald brings unexpected news and a clause Amanda conveniently forgot to read. I was in the kitchen, drying dishes, when I heard the doorbell. Amanda usually beat me to it these days, a subtle power play, but this time I moved fast and reached it first. Standing on the porch was Gerald Simmons, dressed as always in his tan blazer and wire-frame glasses. "Marilyn," he greeted with a warm nod, "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Never," I said. "Please, come in." Amanda appeared like smoke, gliding into the foyer with a stiff smile. "Gerald," she said cautiously, "what a surprise." "Not entirely," he said calmly. "I sent an email yesterday." "Oh," she said, eyes flickering. "I must have missed it." "I'm sure," he said, adjusting his briefcase. We gathered in the living room. Daniel, as always, trailed in late, blinking like he'd just woken from a dream. Gerald opened his folder and cleared his throat. "I'm here today to clarify a few elements in the original deed and living trust agreement. There seems to be confusion about Marilyn's rights." Amanda stiffened. "First," Gerald began, "Marilyn owns 51% of this property. That gives her legal say in household decisions, including, but not limited to, entry rights, security codes, and shared space usage." Daniel looked up, startled. Amanda folded her arms. "We never said she couldn't be here. We just wanted structure." Gerald smiled politely. "Second, and more importantly, there's a residency clause in the trust that states Marilyn may reside in this house uninterrupted until she chooses to leave or becomes mentally incapacitated, as verified by 2 separate physicians." Amanda's face drained of color. I didn't remember that." "I noticed," Gerald said pointedly. "You attempted to file a security change request without informing Marilyn. That is a violation of this clause." Amanda opened her mouth, then shut it again. Daniel sat in stunned silence. Gerald continued. "This clause also states that any effort to forcibly remove or restrict Marilyn from the home may result in loss of all claim to future inheritance related to this property." Amanda gasped. "You never told me that," she hissed to Daniel. He looked lost. "I told both of you," Gerald replied gently, "but people don't always listen when they think someone's old and done." I sat there quietly, watching Amanda unravel. And it wasn't triumph I felt. It was relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the manipulation. And I wasn't powerless. Gerald turned to me. "Would you like me to file a formal letter of enforcement?" I shook my head. "Not yet. But I appreciate the option." Amanda stood abruptly. "Excuse me." She left the room without another word. Daniel looked at me with something between shame and confusion. I looked right back at him and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest truth of all. And in new chapter, Ethan walks in on Amanda crying and asks her one question she can't answer. Amanda didn't come out of her room for hours. Not during dinner, not during dishes. The house had a strange silence, one that felt less like peace and more like a storm waiting to break. I stayed in the guest room, not because I had to, but because I wanted space. Because even justice, when it's fresh, feels fragile. It was nearly 8 p.m. when I heard tiny footsteps padding down the hall. Then a soft knock on Amanda's door. "Mommy?" Pause. "Mommy, are you sad?" No answer. "Can I come in?" A minute later, the door creaked open just enough for Ethan to slip inside. I stood in the hallway, hidden just out of view. I wasn't spying, not really, but something about his voice made me stop and listen. "Mommy," he whispered, "why are you crying?" Amanda's voice was low, broken. "I'm just tired, honey." He climbed up onto the bed. "Is it because of Grandma?" A longer pause. "Yes," she finally said. "Things are complicated." Ethan was quiet for a beat. Then he asked, softly, "Did Grandma do something bad?" My heart clenched. Amanda didn't answer right away. But eventually, I heard her voice, thinner than I'd ever heard it before. "No," she admitted. "No, she didn't." Silence. Then Ethan again. "Then why did you lock her out?" Amanda let out a sob. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet sound of collapse. "I made a mistake," she whispered. There it was. Not for me, not for Daniel, not for the lawyer, for her son. That was the moment she cracked open. That was the moment her story stopped being about power and started being about truth. I backed away quietly. That night, I didn't sleep much, not because I was anxious, but because I felt something changing. The house wasn't just lines of code or names on a deed anymore. It was a witness. To harm, to healing, to choices made in whispers. And the next morning, when Ethan ran into the kitchen and hugged me tighter than he had in weeks, I knew. He understood. Not the legal parts, not the inheritance, but the emotional map of what happened. He had drawn his own conclusion. And love, real love, always knows where to land. In new chapter, Amanda leaves an envelope on my door. Inside, a handwritten note and a question I never expected. It was a quiet morning. Too quiet. No slammed cabinets, no Daniel muttering over email, no Amanda's clipped heels down the hallway. I poured myself a cup of tea, wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders, and walked to the front door to water the porch plants. And there it was, a small white envelope. No name, no stamp, just folded carefully and tucked between the doorframe and the mat. I looked around. The street was still. No cars in motion, no one visible behind the curtains. I picked it up slowly, heart suddenly alert in my chest. Inside was a short note, written in Amanda's familiar upright cursive. If we started over, could it ever feel like family again? A. I read it twice, 3 times. There were no conditions, no explanations, no disclaimers. Just a question, and it was the first real one she'd ever asked me. Because all the others, "Are you sure you want to live here? Wouldn't assisted living be more comfortable? Could you watch Ethan just this once?" Those weren't questions. They were moves, plays, strategies. But this wasn't a chess piece. This was a white flag. It didn't erase what had happened. It didn't rebuild trust overnight. But it was something I hadn't seen in Amanda in years. Uncertainty, vulnerability, a willingness to admit she didn't have the answers. I sat at the table, letter in hand, sunlight drifting across the wood. I didn't know what to write back yet, because forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a gate you open slowly, only when your heart says it's safe to do so. But I knew this. If she was finally asking, maybe she was finally ready to listen. And sometimes, that's the real beginning. In New Chapter, Amanda and I meet on the porch. She doesn't say much, but what she does ask is something I never thought I'd hear from her lips. I was pruning the little rose bush on the front porch when I heard footsteps behind me. Not stomping, not rushing, just careful steps. I turned slowly. Amanda stood at the top of the stairs, hands in the pockets of her soft blue sweater. No makeup, no tight bun, just a woman, tired, thoughtful, and maybe, just maybe, real. "Marilyn," she said. I nodded. "Amanda." She shifted her weight. "I didn't come to fight." I gathered. She looked at the roses. "They're doing better," she said quietly. "Plants thrive when they're not under threat," I replied, not unkindly. A breath of awkward laughter passed between us. Then she looked me dead in the eyes. "I don't know how to fix what I broke," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But would you come with us to Ethan's school event next week? It's Grandparents' Day." The question hung in the air like the scent of the rose petals between us. "I told him you might not want to." That sentence mattered more than she knew. She didn't promise me anything. She didn't pretend it was all fine. But she named the possibility that I had a right to say no. That mattered. I looked at her, really looked, not as the gatekeeper, not as the manipulator, but as a young woman who had once, maybe, been scared I'd outshine her. "I'll come," I said. She blinked, and I saw moisture gather in her eyes. She turned away too quickly for it to fall. "Thank you," she said, barely audible. As she walked back into the house, I stood alone on the porch, pruning shears still in hand, and for the first time in a long time, I realized she didn't ask me because Ethan begged her. She asked me because something in her changed. Maybe not completely, maybe not forever, but it was enough. And sometimes that's all we get in this life. A sliver, a moment, a chance to show up, not to win, but to be whole again. In New Chapter, Grandparents' Day, one hug, one photo, and a sentence from Ethan that brings Amanda to silent tears. The cafeteria smelled like paper cups, juice boxes, and overcooked cookies. Grandparents' Day. I sat beside Ethan at the small round table, the edge of a plastic crown slightly crooked on his head. He was buzzing with pride, showing me his artwork, telling me which of the other kids still believed in the tooth fairy. Across the table, Amanda watched. She hadn't said much since we arrived, but she didn't interrupt, didn't correct, didn't pull him away. For once, she was letting it be. A teacher came by with a Polaroid-style camera. "Smile for the grandparents' wall," she chirped. Ethan pulled me close. I smiled. Amanda smiled. The photo clicked. The teacher handed Ethan the photo to write something on it. He took a purple marker, tongue between his teeth in concentration, and scrawled, "This is my grandma. She's the reason we're a family." Amanda inhaled sharply. I looked up.
she was frozen. Not in offense, not in panic, just stunned. The bell rang. Parents began gathering coats and backpacks. Some kids cried, others clung. Ethan hugged me like he wasn't ready to let go. And Amanda, she didn't rush him. We walked out together, for once, as three. Back home, later that night, I found the photo again. Ethan had slipped it into my purse. I framed it, not because I needed proof, but because it reminded me. Love doesn't need permission. It doesn't need the right code at the door. It just needs someone brave enough to stand in the storm and stay. And that's what I did, until the locks turned again. But this time, not against me. This time, they turned open. And the house, it finally felt like home.